Almost every decision that has ever wrecked someone's life was made in under 60 seconds. Not because the person was foolish, but because in that 60 seconds, something inside them took over that had nothing to do with judgment. I've watched careers end over an email sent in anger. I've watched marriages crack over a sentence said the moment jealousy peaked. I've watched people sign contracts, quit jobs, and burn relationships to the ground, all in the same short window of time. And every single time, if you'd asked that person just 10 minutes later, they would have chosen differently. That gap, that narrow window between the impulse and the 10 minutes that follow it, is where almost all human regret is born. And it's also, if you learn to use it, the exact place where real wisdom begins. I want to tell you about something I've come to rely on more than any strategy, any technique, or any piece of advice I've ever been given. It's not complicated. It's not even original in the way people expect wisdom to be original. It's a rule, just one rule, and it has quietly saved me from more disasters than I can count. I call it the 10-minute rule, and once you understand why it works, you'll start seeing its absence everywhere, in every regretted text message, every rushed investment, every decision made from a place of heat instead of clarity. This isn't about being slow or timid. It's about understanding something crucial about how your own mind works against you in moments that matter most. Section 1: The moment your brain stops thinking clearly. Here's what almost nobody explains properly. When something triggers you, whether it's anger, excitement, fear, or desire, your brain shifts into a different mode of operating. The part responsible for long-term thinking, for weighing consequences, for remembering what you actually value, quiets down, and the part responsible for immediate reaction takes the wheel. This isn't a character flaw, it's how the human brain has always worked, built for moments when speed mattered more than reflection, when a fast reaction meant survival. The problem is that almost none of the decisions we face today require that kind of speed. Sending a message, ending a relationship, making a purchase, reacting to an insult, none of these are life or death situations, yet your body treats them exactly as if they were. That surge you feel, the tightness in your chest, the heat rising in your face, the urge to act right now, that is not clarity. That is your nervous system in a state that was never designed for careful judgment. And the tragedy is, in that state, your decisions feel more certain than ever. That's the cruel part. The less clear you actually are, the more convinced you feel. Section 2: What the 10-minute rule actually is. The rule is simple to state and difficult to practice. Whenever you feel the pull to act immediately, whenever there's urgency behind a decision that isn't actually time-sensitive, you wait 10 minutes before doing anything, not to distract yourself, not to suppress the feeling, just to let 10 minutes pass while the feeling that's driving you naturally begins to settle. 10 minutes doesn't sound like much, but physiologically, it's enough time for the intensity of an emotional surge to start coming down from its peak. You're not trying to eliminate the emotion. You're trying to stop making decisions while it's still steering. After those 10 minutes, you ask yourself one honest question: do I still want to do this? Sometimes the answer is yes, and that's valuable information too. It tells you the impulse was actually aligned with something real. But more often, especially with anger, jealousy, or wounded pride, the answer softens, the urgency fades. And what's left in its place is something closer to your actual judgment, the version of you that isn't reacting but choosing. Section 3: Why smart people skip this rule the most. You'd think the people who most need this rule would be the ones most likely to use it, but I've noticed the opposite. The sharper someone's mind, the more likely they are to trust their first instinct completely, because their instincts have been right often enough to earn that trust. But being right in low-stakes moments builds a dangerous confidence for high-stakes ones. A person who trusts their quick judgment in everyday situations starts assuming that same speed applies when the emotional stakes are high, and it doesn't. The moments that require the most patience are exactly the moments where impulsive people feel the most certain. I've seen this pattern in incredibly capable people, the ones who pride themselves on decisiveness. Decisiveness is a strength until it becomes a habit that overrides the very moments where slowness would have saved them. The 10-minute rule isn't a sign of weakness or hesitation. It's a deliberate override of a system that, in this specific kind of moment, cannot be trusted. Section 4. How to actually use the 10 minutes. The 10 minutes only work if you use them correctly, and most people waste them. Scrolling through your phone during those 10 minutes doesn't count because you're just replacing one form of stimulation with another, and the nervous system stays activated. What actually works is far simpler. Step away from whatever triggered you. Change your physical environment if you can, even just walking into another room. Let your breathing slow down naturally. You don't need an elaborate technique, just a few slower breaths than the ones you were taking in the heat of the moment. And resist the urge to rehearse the argument in your head, because rehearsing keeps the emotional charge alive instead of letting it fade. The goal during those 10 minutes isn't to solve the problem. It's to let your body come back down to a state where your mind can actually think instead of just react. Once that happens, and you'll feel it happen, a kind of settling, a return of perspective, that's when the real thinking can begin. Section 5. The situations where this rule changes everything. This rule isn't just useful, it's decisive in specific situations that come up again and again in life. In conflict, when someone says something that stings and every part of you wants to respond immediately, the 10 minutes almost always changes what you say, and usually for the better. In financial decisions, when an opportunity feels urgent, when someone tells you this deal won't last, when your gut says act now, the 10 minutes gives you room to ask whether the urgency is real or manufactured. In relationships, when you're about to send a message driven by hurt or jealousy, those 10 minutes are often the difference between a moment of vulnerability and a moment you can't take back. And in moments of temptation, when you're about to abandon a commitment you made to yourself in a clearer state of mind, the 10 minutes reconnects you with the version of you that made that commitment in the first place. Across every one of these situations, the pattern is identical. The urgency you feel in the moment is almost never as real as it seems, and the version of you that exists 10 minutes later is almost always wiser than the version demanding action right now. Section 6. Building the habit before you need it. The hardest part of this rule isn't understanding it, it's remembering to use it in the exact moment your body is telling you there's no time to wait. That's why the habit has to be built before the crisis, not during it. Start practicing this rule with small, low-stakes moments, the minor irritations, the small temptations, so that by the time a real high-stakes situation arrives, the pause has already become instinctive rather than something you have to consciously remember. Over time, you'll start to feel the trigger and the pause as almost the same reflex. The urge to act immediately will arrive, and right behind it, without effort, the instinct to wait will follow. That's not weakness, that's what mental discipline actually looks like when it's fully developed. It doesn't feel like restraint, it feels natural. Closing, the space where wisdom lives. What I've come to understand after watching this rule work in my own life and in the lives of people I care about is that wisdom isn't about knowing more or thinking faster. It's about creating just enough space between the feeling and the action for your actual values to catch up. 10 minutes is such a small amount of time in the scope of a life, but it's exactly within that small window that most of our biggest regrets are either created or avoided entirely. The next time you feel that pull, that certainty, that sense that you have to act right now, remember that the urgency is rarely the truth. It's just a feeling passing through you, demanding to be treated like a fact. Give it 10 minutes, let it pass through. And then decide, not from the heat of the moment, but from the clarity that was there all along, waiting for you to catch up to it.